President Boyd regrets that he won't be able to join us today. He had to go to Nashville for a Senate Education Committee meeting and a budget hearing, so he sends his regrets. Can you all hear us on the Zoom?
Yes.
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 Great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and if anyone joins us later, that is fine. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate you all volunteering to be a part of the Transparency Initiative. I wanted to start with just sort of telling you a little bit how we got here. President Boyd started in late November, and his maybe first or second day on the job, he came in and said, I want to do a Transparent UT initiative. So with the help of the government relations team and general counsel, we sat down and talked about how do we get this started. And you all are part of that discussion. We thought it might be good to have a group of constituencies represented across the system and within the community to sort of help us figure out what do we need to have on our website, tennessee.edu/transparency if you haven't seen it yet. That would be helpful, provide the information that all of our stakeholders are interested in, and really sort of give you a look into UT. None of the information that's on there right now is actually new. It's all already on our websites. We're just trying to find the information that people want and make it more accessible. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what we've already discussed. Everyone in the room got a packet. Everyone on the call, you should have received from me an agenda and a list of initial information last week. I just emailed you a list of suggested additions that I have received over the past couple of days from people in this group that I wanted to talk about today as well. And then we'll also talk about additional ones. The first attachment after the agenda in your packet will show you the things that our little working group came up with that we felt would be a good way to launch the Transparency Initiative. Most of those items, about half of them, are already on the website. The second half are in development, so we are working on those right now. And Dennis Hinksler from Institutional Research is going to give us an update in just a second about those dashboards.
Tiffany?
Yes.
This is Terry in Chattanooga. Just for clarification, is that the attachment that is entitled Transparent UT?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's the information. Everybody's here says additional information because I updated it this morning. But it's the same information. I just added a clarifying title. That information is either already on the website or is in development for the website. The last attachment, and the one I just emailed to those on the phone, those are ideas that have come in through email to me since we announced the launch of the initiative in late November. So we'll discuss those in just a second, but I want to turn it over right now to Dennis Hinksler to talk about, I'm sorry, Harry.
For the sake of transparency.
Sure. That's a great idea. Yes, okay.
Who's who and who we're connected to.
That's a great idea. Okay, I'll start. I'm Tiffany Carpenter. I'm the Associate Vice President for Communications and Marketing for the UT system.
I'm Harry Brooks, a retired state legislator, currently serving on the Board of Trustees at Carson.
I'm Scott Gordy. I'm with the Institute for Public Service, and I'm the Chief Information Officer there.
I'm Dennis Hinksler, Associate Vice President and Director of Institutional Research for the system. Matthew Scholes, General Counsel for the University.
I'm David Mandeside, Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor for the Knoxville campus.
Toby Small, Interim Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Engagement for the Knoxville campus.
I'm John Franke. I'm here on behalf of Representative Martin Daniel of the 18th District.
Melissa Tyndall, Director of Communications for the UT system.
Good morning. My name is John North. I'm a longtime journalist currently working at WBIR here in Knoxville.
Okay, let's start with Carrie Whitworth.
Hi, Carrie Whitworth, Assistant Vice President for Government Relations, coming to you live from Nashville this morning.
Okay, Chattanooga.
Terry Denniston, Chief of Staff at Chattanooga.
Hey guys.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm Rachel McIntyre Smith. I'm a student at UT Chattanooga.
Okay, Dr. Edwards.
Hi, welcome. I'm coming to you from New Orleans this morning, and I'm representing the Institute of Agriculture. I'm a professor and graduate director there.
Thank you. UT Martin.
Edie Gibson, UT Martin, Executive Assistant to the Chancellor.
And the Health Science Center.
Hey, Sally Badu, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Communications and Marketing.
Is there anyone else on the line we haven't recognized? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. Okay, Dennis Hinksler, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the dashboards.
Sure. Thank you, Tiffany. Some of you may not know what institutional research is about, and so a quick overview that we are responsible for producing a lot of the official data and analysis for the system, but on each campus there is an institutional research office. IR typically is responsible for all the data, official reports, both at the federal, state level, a lot of decision support, policy analysis, and responding to various ad hoc requests. To do this, we have access to basically all the data at the university, HR, financial research, student information, etc. As part of that, the Institutional Research Office produces a series of reports both on the campus and at the system level. Some of those you may see as quick facts, accountability reports, dashboards, common data sets, IPEDS reporting to the federal government, etc. Lots of data in different areas. What we have, back in 2011, we created a dashboard for the strategic plan. But it was a very elementary type of dashboard. And what we are working on now is updating that dashboard to be much more interactive with drill down capability and much more comprehensive. We're in the process of developing that. We hope to launch it probably around June 1st. And we need your advice as well as to what types of information would be helpful to be put on this dashboard. Part of that related to that is developing information for UT presence in each legislative district in each county. And so last Friday, I sent you a copy of something we recently completed that shows for each legislative district what is UT presence, indicating information about the number of enrollments, alumni, employees, economic impact, Tennessee and volunteers served both within the IPS and the Institute of Ag. Lots and lots of data that we can generate and provide in the dashboard. But the question is, what's important? What would you like to see and how to display it? And so the idea, we're taking this opportunity now to develop a new, much more comprehensive, much more user-friendly, much more visual type of dashboard. And we need your help in making recommendations for what that should look like.
You want some of that?
I think it's part of our discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great to put together these dashboards, and I think especially in a visual format, because as a mathematician by training, I don't need a visual format, but it helps, and most people like that visual format. One thing I noted on here is a typo. Is UT, the Knoxville campus is referred to as UT, and I think that's confusing to people.
We had this discussion yesterday. In a previous life, it used to be in the style guide as that, but we are changing that to UTK. So we will make that change.
Great. And I would think, I was talking to Wayne Davis this morning about this before coming up here. And we both agreed it would be useful to circulate these through the campuses, at least to the chancellor level, or the communications staff, just to make sure we know what's going out, and that we can also provide feedback. That would be my second comment. And then sometimes I'm not sure that people are always going to know what the terms mean, like sites in district. Do we need to define that? I don't know if it's defined on the other side. Oh, sites, all buildings that are active. Okay. Making sure, maybe passing this by, and I'd be interested in people in the community who aren't from university backgrounds. Are we using lingo that you're not used to? Do we need to explain it better? So just throw that out. But I think this is great.
So this is first in terms of legislative district, but is this map going to be on the website where you click on a county and see this?
So we are discussing how we can make this county instead of legislative district, because we have that information that way from IPS and UTIA. be an interactive website on the front page of Tennessee.edu, but we'll also have a link on the government relations advocacy page as well as the transparency page.
So we're working right now to convert this to each county instead of legislative district, it'll be by county. So we have the same information. One of the, David, you brought up a good point in terms of definitions. In higher education, there are multiple ways to define things. I like to use the example of what is the student-faculty ratio? And at a previous institution, we calculated that there were 82 different ways to calculate the student-faculty ratio. So when you take, when you take a look at U.S. News and World Report rankings, which is one of those measures, they're maximizing their ranking to use a definition that is most appropriate for them. So that's some of the issues that we have in presenting data. And David is correct. I mean, how do you, in a limited amount of space, define the terms and definitions without overwhelming the audience? That is one of the problems we always face.
Dennis, I'd like to add two things. And one of them you're already aware of, but just for the benefit of the group, because I have worked pretty extensively with Dennis's team on the legislative district piece that is before you. One thing of interest to our team is broadening out that list of types of people that the university has trained in your district or by county. So you can see initially on the first cut of this document, we have educators, medical professionals. There's some coding, as I understand it, on Dennis's side of the ledger that has to happen to be able to say, to broaden this list to, various different disciplines, where are, how many people we're training in districts, in different types of fields, but that is something I definitely recommend. The other piece is under this enrichment section of the sheet, Dennis. And perhaps this is another case of definitions, but alumni donations to UT. I'm wondering if a better measure might not be just overall private support for UT rather than just limiting that to donations from alumni. That's just some initial feedback.
Any other thoughts on the UT presence information?
Carrie, this is Terry. Could I, Dennis, on Carrie's comment, I agree on the alumni donations. What was the thinking of just right now having it alumni donations?
We have lots of information. This was something that we're working with a team. I don't know exactly, Carrie may be able to help us out on this one, but I think the idea was we have donor information, we have alumni information, alumni donations as well. So it is possible to show, say for any given county, where they are living and how much they're donating from that county. That might be a possibility. So this is something that was easily available and to incorporate. But I think this was done fairly quickly, just in the last couple of months, to get something available for the government relations team for the legislative process.
Yeah, so Terry, I would just add to that. I think that the thought is demonstrating that there are many types of audiences contributing to the University of Tennessee. The state is obviously a very important stakeholder in that, but that, there are also private contributions coming in from these districts as well. And that's all there is to it.
Thank you.
One of our key indicators at the Institute for Public Service, and I think it's kind of encapsulated in Tennesseans served, but we categorize everything that we do by either activity or project, and I don't know if there's much value in looking at individual activities and projects, saying we did this many things in your district. So I would just throw that out. But then we also do a lot of training of county and city officials. And so I think there's value in identifying that as well, because we help build better, the university helps build better government in your district by the things that we do that way. So just throwing that out.
Sure, and with technology, give you an example. If you say we could develop a website that if you click on that area for IPS, you can get the list of the projects.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the way the technology is now moving. It has much more ability to drill down and get more detailed information.
Absolutely.
So things like that to think about as we go forward.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Senator Brooks.
Would it be possible to set up a link back to scholarship availability or opportunities? Because there are a lot of scholarships that are unique to certain counties. For example, Hancock County may have a scholarship that's tied to UT. And when the folks from Hancock plug in, and you can create a link back to, you can begin the listing of unique to that community. And then you can do the broader valedictorian, so on and so forth, right down the list. The idea is to enhance the diversity of kids from all across the state. And the better information we can provide through a scholarship, I think that will assist with a multitude of issues.
Right now, that information is maintained on each of the campuses. And so one of the questions is, would you want to know from a system perspective, all the scholarships that a given county may offer at Martin, at Chattanooga, at Health Science, and Knoxville? Or would you be, the easier way would be to go in at each campus and then have that capability.
If you can create a link to where someone can track over to because this may be the source that they begin the research, and then the linkage back to where
Yeah, because so often, that's a very good point, because so often students, we have these scholarships that people are unaware, especially in the smaller counties, that there are these scholarships and we have this money sitting there, we can't use it for another purpose. So let's find a way to use it. That's a great suggestion.
And the other part is, as we think about how we serve the state, I know, I used to work in an academic college. We have 4 hike programs where we reach out to high school students. They're here on campus. Engineering has programs. And so even if we can look at that level in terms of what we do in these individual places, it may be fascinating in terms of the outreach, the impact for pre-collegiate programs, even at that granular level. May be helpful. And I think that is logged by campus of what Knoxville have. I have some data about those already.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
Another thought along similar lines as scholarships. I know that one thing that came up in last year's legislative discussions about the Tuition Transparency Act was that each of our campuses has a very impressive, in my opinion, student net cost calculator, where you enter details specific to your family situation, right? So whether it's, family income, number of people in your family, things like that, and then it will drill down your estimated cost to attend that institution. It's a really handy tool. It's accessible via the financial aid websites of each of our, and probably the admission websites of each of our campuses, but having those centrally located, if we're going to be highlighting scholarships as well, I think that would be an interesting addition.
But you saying that just made me think, and maybe this is heresy to say this, but folks can use this Hope Scholarship to go to community colleges relatively free. So somehow showing folks that have taken advantage of that, at a very low cost, and then come on to UT to graduate, would there be any value by, using that as a, way of showing?
So you mean Tennessee Promise, and then they
Yes.
convert in? Okay.
Yes, and then they converted and came on to UT to finish out their degree. So I don't know if there would be any value of trying to track that, or show that to show some options.
So Christy Alejandro with Tennessee Promise has some pretty deep research on where the students go and how that works. So if we did end up moving in that direction, she might be able to help us sort of make that bridge.
But so often, I mean, I like both suggestions. Yeah, yes, maybe it's heresy, but I just want kids to go to college.
Yes,
right. And so the more we can dispel the myth that it's unaffordable, the better. So that a kid who's from a family that earns less than $40,000 comes to UTK for free. Get that out there with those calculators.
There is a lot of myth surrounding the cost of attendance, and we know that, for example, the 46% of our students are graduating without any debt, and that on the Knoxville campus, the students only pay 47% of the full cost of tuition and mandatory fees, which is to back out all the grants and scholarships. And so the net tuition is they're only paying 46%.
And that's good information for us to have. But when they can actually plug in the numbers and say, oh, it's only going to cost me $3,000 a year to go to college, I thought it was going to be $20,000 a year. That's huge.
Which is the net cost calculator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it makes it personal.
The other thing I was going to say is I'm looking at the sheet that you sent out, and I see there's 0%. If there's a 0% of something, I would just not mention that. We have a 0% of volunteers from ag research.
Any other thoughts on dashboards?
I would just suggest, just as a regular old user, that especially with the University of Tennessee system and the great pride and ownership that people feel about it, that the more and the way it's presented, you give folks this sense of ownership and, hey, this is who we are, this is who you are, and we want you to have a good glimpse into what it is we do and how you are a part of it. I've always been struck by that. I didn't go to UT, but I've always been impressed by the great sense of ownership and loyalty to the system and your school in this state.
Has any thought been given as to why UT has the rule, which I think that prohibits the use of your mobile phone to copy records? I mean, and in fact, you can have to pay $300 and $400, depending on how much you want. But what is the public policy reason that prevents one from using their phone?
So I'll ask Matthew if is there an actual, I don't know if Matthew has an actual reason. I will tell you, we have some individuals who will send us hundreds of FOI requests for information we have one individual who will send us 10 to 15. Okay. We have individuals who will send us records requests that will take us hours and hours and hours of man time that we dedicate to FOI requests. And so that actually, it helps us know who really wants the information and then who's just getting information because it's available. If that makes
well,
sense.
there's still a time. Anyone can come in and
Absolutely.
say, I want to see copies of this. So you still have to spend the man hours pulling the records. If
Absolutely.
they decide they don't want a copy, you can sit here for 12 hours and go through the documents and decide I don't want to copy them. But if you do want to copy them, you still spent the time. So how are you saving time by having the rule?
It allows people.
I mean, is it a revenue issue?
No.
It allows people to exploit the loophole in the law about the difference between inspection and copy.
Well, Knox County and the city of Knoxville have moved the other direction.
We'll look into that. I'll add that in.
I think
it seems to me, if a citizen has the right to walk in and see Wade Gillies' emails to a certain person, and they just want to thumb through them, they don't want a copy, you've got to provide it.
I don't know
if they
what
want a copy, what's wrong with, I mean, you can have a miner there and make sure they don't run off with something. But how does that take more time? You're having to pull it in. I mean, if you're concerned about the number of people wanting records, then you're going to have to change the basic law that lets them get the records.
No, that's
but
a
that
good
law is
question.
not changing.
I'll add that to the list for us to look into.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up, maybe right now is not the best time to discuss that, but I would echo what Victor says as a working journalist, but also a member of the public. There should be some thought, and this is a good opportunity this year to think about access to records. And again, just a quick comment, and I'll be quiet about this.
Maybe put a limit, 30 pages.
It is.
That's a really good idea.
It is logical to think about the ability for the public to just merely take a picture and move on. But, you know, I just throw that thought out there. I don't know if we want to talk about that right now, but I would say it makes sense to be able to do that.
I think that's a really good point. And I like Victor's comment about maybe we put a limit to it. I think that has a lot of merit. So why don't I take that back to our communications and GR team, and we sort of figure out how something like that might work and look at how other folks are structuring that kind of thing.
Well,
I think that
Mayor,
definitely has
you didn't have cell phones then, but people could bring in copying machines. We let them do it.
Yeah.
If we had the city do it, we charge, I think, 15 cents a page. But somebody wanted to save money, and fine, if they want to save money. I don't understand the public policy reason behind this, other than you want to make it more difficult.
That will actually save money.
But
it'll save money and time.
Sure.
Because now that you're taking the picture, you don't have to have a staff person go with the copying machine.
Unless
But
it
it's
has
not
to be
an
redacted.
official record.
Right,
when you
unless
take
there's
it.
redaction.
Yeah, that's actually true. We do have to redact it, and then we have to make copies of the redacted and the original. So,
But one of the, on the run-of-the-mill request, I agree with you. But when somebody requests 6 months of somebody's emails, and we have to spend, 100 hours doing that work, we don't get to recoup that cost if somebody just comes in and looks at it. We get to recoup the cost if somebody takes copies. If they take a picture of it, we don't get to recoup the cost. So that's the issue, I think, with the government's on that.
right.
It's not just a record sitting in the clerk's office, but in the age of email, we get really burdensome requests. And there's nothing in the Public Records Act that protects against burdensome requests except for the labor charge that we're allowed to charge for copies.
So in a previous
I think you
position,
can still do the charge.
No, we can't. We cannot charge unless
unless they make a copy.
unless we make a copy. That's the way
You
the
make
law
a
reads.
copy.
Unless
You
we
make a
make a
copy.
copy.
you can make the request more specific. You can't just do a fishing expedition. Say, I want a copy of 6 months worth of emails. I'll just look at it.
Well, so I will give you an example of something that I did as an FOI request when I worked in athletics. This was about a decade ago. When Coach Kiffin left, I had a reporter ask me for 6 months of cell phone records for 4 coaches. I had to redact every single student's number because it was protected by FERPA. It was thousands of hours that were completely unrecoupable if we did not charge. And that wasn't, when we have really thin, small staffs, that's thousands of hours that we're not spending working towards the University of Tennessee to make us productive. And so that's sort of where there's some.
And this is an issue that the State Office of Open Records Council has wrestled with for years, and there's an advisory committee there that deals with it. And so far, I guess the legislature is going to look at the Public Records Act again at this session and look at this issue. I think is one of the issues that I know is.
But I'm saying the trend is towards openness. The city,
Absolutely.
Knox County under Mayor Burgess' leadership abandoned.
And I would love to find a.
It's not an issue of openness. The record is open.
Right.
It's the cost of doing the work.
It's the cost, right?
But if you've already pulled it, what's the cost of me using my phone and going through?
It's not that. It's the cost of getting the record to the room.
But you can't charge for that.
I can if you inspect it, but I can if I make you a copy of it.
No, and that's my issue.
It's to prohibit so I would say that we've stuck to that policy because it prohibits abuse of the ability to redact, to request that information because of staff time. However, you make a very valid point that I think we should look at and see if there's some way we can put some
I think you ought to
parameters
look at it
to make that available.
become a little more reasonable.
Right.
Because there's obviously going to be requests that, well, maybe there ought to be an exception here.
Right, absolutely. I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair. I will, when we finish this meeting, just as an FYI, we are recording the meeting. We are going to put it on the Transparency website. But I will be emailing you all updates on where we fall on things. So one of my takeaway action items from this will be to pull together a group to talk about how we can move that forward. And I'll keep you all posted on that. let's move on to submitted ideas. So I emailed a list of ideas that I have received via email since we announced the Transparency Initiative. A couple of these we've completed this week when we got them. A couple of these were actually Mr. Ash's. So we have added a direct link to the board bylaws and policies, I should report on there, and a direct link to addressing the board to the Transparency website. Other ideas that we've received from members of this committee are athletic department budgets, campus crime and safety stats and policies, capital plans, maps, campus magazines and news feeds, campus contact information, international student numbers and tuition information, a list of social media accounts, UT Foundation information, and video resources. Most of this stuff already lives on our websites. So if there's no objections to that, I will go ahead and figure out where the information is, and we'll go ahead and add this information to what we currently have. I loved the idea. This was Mr. North's suggestion of video resources. I'm going to share that with our fellow communicators across the state because that's an opportunity for us.
Is there a means on the website to email individual trustees? Or does it have to go through UT and that makes it subject to open records?
So it goes through the trustee's office, and that makes it, any email that is sent to a trustee on
Once I
behalf
happen
of
to know
UT's.
John Compton's personal email, I can't email him and keep it all public record.
Well, anything you send to them about university business is public record anyway. That's sort of the opposite of transparency. But no, anything you send to John Compton about the University of Tennessee is open record, even if you send it to his personal email account.
Regarding video, just speaking as somebody who's worked 4 years at a television station, honestly, we're the #1 station in town, and we have no clue about the immense video resources that probably exist in the UT system. And if we knew, people would probably flip out, because I'll just give you an example. I've just gone through YouTube, and some things that I thought were very interesting that the athletic department posted are there. We had no clue, and we could have used some of that. And it's, to use a tired old cliche, it's also kind of low-hanging fruit that people with less resources than, say, Channel 10 has, could say, holy cow, it's in the public domain, it's from a government entity, if you will, we can use this. And then that further disseminates what you all have.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea. And pretty easy to
Exactly.
on anything
Exactly.
you need regarding the university.
Exactly.
We will work with the communicators on that. Our next communicators meeting, well, we actually meet monthly, so we'll put that on the agenda for discussion. Any other ideas from the group that we haven't covered or that haven't been submitted that you think would be worth adding to the transparency
I'd like
initiative?
to just quickly add on to what John said regarding video. I think that to look after our friends in the print media, we had a bank of photographs that they could pull, stock photography, some sort of library, whether it be an online publication, if you will, or a print publication. I think that would be helpful.
It's a great idea. And again, I know the system has terrific images, historic images. They're just fantastic.
Okay, great.
Tiffany, I do have a suggestion, or maybe two suggestions to consider. One of those, I noticed that international student numbers and tuition information was a submitted idea. On the flip side, that's great, well and good, but on the flip side, I think something important for us to highlight system-wide and for all of our campuses is the percentage of Tennesseans that we are educating. Sometimes I find in our work there can be a perception that we're not educating Tennesseans, or that our students aren't Tennessee students, and that's very much not the case, right? I mean, we have, I think Knoxville, it's, high 80s, if not 90%, high 80s, I think, in-state students. Making that information clear to the public, I think, would be advantageous. The second idea, it's not really a data point, it's more just an overall general observation that I think is worthy for discussion. Obviously, post UT Focus Act, we now have campus advisory boards at each of our campuses. And while those are not governing boards, they're advisory in nature, I do think there may need to be some discussion down the road about are those meetings live streamed? Can they be archived? And is there a public comment period at those meetings? Given the legislative history, and Chairman Brooks, I'm glad you're here today because you and I worked on a previous iteration of a community relations function of the UT Board of Trustees, where public comment was a fairly prominent feature, and trying to solicit comments from the community before the issues become much bigger than a community level issue. I think those are two things. There's obviously always many factors in the equation on cost and resources and how all this comes to fruition, but I do think they're worthy of discussion.
Good point. I will run that through the office and see what we need to do with that.
Sure.
I'll talk to the chancellors and the president, but that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Yes, Dennis.
Tiffany, another item that could be added to the transparency website is what is referred to as the common data set. Back in the 1980s and 90s, the various college guidebooks would be sending their surveys to the universities to complete. And they were each unique, and it was a very time-intensive effort. The universities got together and developed what is referred to now as a common data set. All of the types of information that a prospective student is wanting to know about the campus. It's admissions information, financial aid information, faculty and staff information, student organizations. It's about 16 pages worth of data that each campuses provide, and we could have that link to the dashboard as well, or to the transparency website.
Perfect. Anything else anyone would like to add?
Hey, Tiffany, this is Rachel from Chattanooga. I just had a few questions. One, on the transparency website, it says under financials that there will be data about student organization spending. And I was just wondering, will this show both option 1 and option 2 spending, and what will this look like?
Yes, I believe it will. We're still working through that. So stay tuned. I might have to have more of an explanation for you on that in the next call. But
Okay.
I will before that. We'll report back to the group at the next call.
Is it the purview of this committee to, like, you want to, the way you have it, if I'm reading this right, they allocate up to 30 minutes for public forum?
Well, it's 5 minutes per speaker.
Well, that's 6 people. So if 12 people show up, 6 just don't get to speak.
Well, so what we've done in the past on that is we basically just said we'll work on the agenda. If more than 6 people sign up, then we'll work the agenda around. We have never had that issue yet, but we know we need to be
Well,
flexible.
if another Lady Ball issue comes up,
Right.
we will have.
Right.
You may go 3 years and never have it, but then something like Lady Balls happens, and all of a sudden, the internet goes viral.
How long should the board allow? 3 hours.
For 16 years, however long it came, when we had a Stetson case in the black community, we went 5 or 6 hours. I wasn't going to cut off the mic.
I will say that Representative Daniel has paid attention to this, and he is concerned about the current restrictions on the public being able to speak to the Board of Transparency. It's the one issue that he sent me here with to talk about. And right now I think it's 5 days advance notice to sign up.
Well, they're changing to 3, I'm told.
3.
Yes, we're working on
But why even?
that.
I mean, I think the limitation, 5 minutes per person, is reasonable, and we did that at City Council, but most times it was 10, 15 minutes. I mean, it was rare, but the Stetson thing, everyone remember, where a black person died in police custody, and I ended up sending them to the review board, but we went months for public forum, and we had to move it to the front, and I ignored the 5-minute limitation. I mean, you had a volatile situation out there.
And I think we'll have to be
And
somewhat
you all don't
flexible.
have
Right.
that. I ain't just saying 30 minutes, you can do the math, so you're only gonna let 6 people, and which 6 is it? The first 6 that signed up?
That has
And
been
you
the
can
rule.
game it, have them all on one side of an issue. I mean,
Right.
Tiffany and Matthew, this is a question along the same lines, but I mean, you all know the board rules probably better than I do, but does the board chair not have some level of discretion there in the rules of granting an extension already, or is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's what I seemed to recall.
We have had issues. We have had issues in the past where we've said if more people than 6 sign up, we will be flexible with that policy. We've just never had that happen at this time to have that conversation.
I think Terry's right. I think there is flexibility. When we were having the discussion, I believe that came up, and I think the board chair or the committee chair, however it was being done, had some flexibility. But the question I think that needs to be raised, and curious as to Martin's thoughts on it, do you allow 600 people to sign up?
Right.
Certainly, there has to be some degree of.
Do me this favor, bring to us an idea, because if it goes to rules and regulations, we need to know in advance where Martin is on that issue. Because if it becomes an item that we've got to legislate through his committee, then I think it's important to know where he's at before there is a recommendation. So if you can provide that input to us in regard to that, because if we create something that's a rule or a reg,
That's right.
then we're going to the legislature, and Martin's chairing that committee now.
That's a great idea.
So
I think the reality is you're not gonna have that. My experience is, other than that one time, we never had more than maybe 10.
I think there were circumstances that we ran into with the legislature looked at it, where there was a desire for 40 or 50 people to individually speak, and from that standpoint. So but I think the point is, I think your comment was that you've got to have some reasonableness to it, but let's define reasonableness before we go down that road too far.
Of course, and right now, I think the rules, it says a 30-minute limit, which,
yeah, but
as you stated, it's feasible.
That may not be
certainly 30
reasonable,
minutes.
but let's create his concept of reasonableness, because while he's maybe on the committee, we need his input.
Follow what Harry said. If in fact you had a high-profile issue, let it go back to, and you really did have 150 people, I just call a special board meeting and say, we'll be here all morning. Everybody has 5 minutes. We're happy to hear from you. We know you don't have to comment on how you feel on it, but we'll just take the time out. I mean, that's how alumni feel. And, if this takes 3.5 hours, well, I mean, I do that, that just is part of it. It's a public board. And it has to be separate from the regular board meeting. But I mean, if it's a hot issue that people feel strongly about, and occasionally that comes up about every 4 years,
I think that's
I
something we
think
would
you ought to
definitely
just take
consider.
the time out and do it.
So we had the
It's a
same-
special board meeting.
We had the same issue in the legislature.
Right.
But we've got a defined limit of the meeting.
Right.
So we had to kind of try to balance that concept with, do we want to spend the entire meeting? Then
But
come
you
back
all,
next week.
you can meet between sessions, and that was a safety valve then.
Yeah.
When you're on in session, when you're in session, you're under time pressure.
Right. But I think the idea that you're bringing is important to the transparency concept.
Yes.
I think it's very critical.
You don't want people to feel like there's a limit. And I would put in the rules, the chair has the authority to extend. I mean, it doesn't say that now.
That's
I
okay.
remember someone reading it, how do they know that? We know in this room, but I mean.
So the board will have to vote on the policy to move the period of time to submit a request to address the board from 5 to 3 days. They are actually trying to figure out if they can get that in at the next board meeting. We can give this information to them.
The issue is it's probably going to have to go through the rulemaking process this time because of the change in law and rule versus policy. And so to make that change and have one rule go through and then to have another recommendation come forward with a time limit, then we have 2 rules going through the process. I just think there's got to be some consideration on when we do this. I mean,
If we do anything that results in a rule change, then you're in the legislature.
Right. So we know we're going to do, where we think, the board ultimately obviously is the one to decide, but the administration, I guess, is going to propose
a recommendation, right?
Is there any other change that this group, think needs to be made? And would there be a recommendation of the president that we wait for, say, Representative Daniels' idea before we
I'm
make
not suggesting we wait, but I'm saying that we've got to have that input.
Right, I agree.
We don't need to be heading down one road, and the legislature may be looking at a total different thing if we got to go to the rule change. If what we do doesn't necessitate a rule change, then it doesn't become a legislative issue.
Well, you're better off doing internally here what you can do to avoid this.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I would try to be as accommodating to the legislative view, even if it may not precisely dovetail with your view, but as long as it doesn't do violence, because you just do better if you don't have to have a big public hearing.
Absolutely. So I think our next step is for us to get some guidance from Representative Daniel then on what he feels is reasonable for that. And we'll move from there. We'll keep you posted on that. Are there any other ideas that this group has, or are we ready to move about talking about how
Terry, this is Terry, and I'm not in the room with Rachel Smith, our student rep on this group, but I didn't think she was quite finished with some of her questions. She may have been, but Rachel, can you?
Oh. Yeah, I think you're a mind reader, Terry. I actually did have another comment. So I know this is probably going to open a can of worms, but I've had this brought up with multiple students I've talked to about this initiative, and a lot of students would like to know more information about how many professors or faculty members or staff are part of the concealed carry on campus. I know that there's a lot of rules about, their identity and stuff, but at the very least, if we could include how many are on each campus, I just know a lot of students would like more information about that.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. I'll look into that for you.
Yeah, there is I seem to recall that may require a statutory change. Matthew would know, but.
So
the question was about how many faculty are part of the concealed carry.
Not who, but how many.
Okay.
Can we do that under the current language?
I think as long as we're not revealing the identity of.
That's correct. But I thought that
we believe that's possible, Rachel. I'll look into that for you.
I was
okay,
curious.
Thank you.
Was it perceived as and I'm just curious, was it perceived as a positive or a negative when you talked to other students?
It was actually mixed. So some students were negative, some students were positive.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. Anything else, Rachel?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will look into that. One other thing we would like to do is solicit feedback from our various stakeholder groups. We were going to work on a survey to ask what they'd like to see, and then maybe create a social campaign to get that word out. We'll also host it on the website. Are there other ideas this group have for soliciting ideas from the general public and other stakeholders?
It's not so much ideas for generating, ways to generate ideas, but rather the process once we get things, once we decide what we want to put out there, involving stakeholders and maybe focus groups where we put things out there. Hey, does this work?
Right.
For the chancellors, for the campuses, and having sort of an iterative process, because somebody can say, I would like the number of faculty with concealed carry listed. Did we get it in the way that they wanted? Those types of things. So make this an iterative. So in meta comment, make this an iterative process.
I like that a lot.
As we put these websites together, let's find out, is it doing what people want?
So maybe what we do with this is we go ahead and put as much of the information as we can get now up on the site, do the survey, And then maybe in a couple of months, we start putting together focus groups to have people react to it. Is this what you want? Does this work for you? Do you need it in a different format? And sort of get some feedback. So that way, over the next 6 months to a year, we can make sure we're making this what people actually need.
Here's a suggestion. Sorry, just very quickly, I would say you're going to have a captive audience thanks to our #1 basketball team in the country at Thompson Bowling. You could do even kind of a little information that says, here's our website. Would you like to know more? We want you to know more. You have some suggestions, or you could do it. You probably won't get massive response,
right,
but you might get some.
I think that's a great idea, because what it does is emphasizes, this is the #1 basketball team in the country, and it's part of UT. It's part of this great university. It's not just an athletic team. So, and it gets that information.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So you also just reminded me of another thing. Melissa is working on monthly columns from the president every month. And so maybe once we get this to I would call the website where it's at right now, phase 1. Maybe we'll call phase 1.5 when we get some of this other stuff added up. But maybe we have a monthly column is being distributed to all papers across the state that talks about the Transparency Initiative in more detail and asks people to provide their feedback and insights.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea, and I think you'll find they'll use it too.
I'm assuming, and you know what they say about assuming, that we have Google Analytics or something on this site, so we know where people go and we can kind of determine what is of interest to them.
We do, and that is probably a good segue into what are our next steps.
Take it to them.
Actually, before I get to next steps, I have one concern that has been emailed in that I did want to make the group aware of. We have had a few faculty members concerned about salary information being on the website. I don't feel like that's going to keep us from putting it on the website because we already provide this information every single year to the Gannett papers, and they already have it on their websites. It's already public information. So we're going to post the salary database in the same format that we provide it to Gannett every year, and we'll update that once a year after the July 1 raises go into effect. So that way it's the most accurate information for that year, but that will probably only be updated once a year, unless someone has some objections to that.
Do they not realize it's public information? I mean, they not like it, but it's.
They felt like people had to dig for it, was the comment I got back on that, which that's sort of the opposite of the Transparency Initiative again. So we're going to include it, but I did want to voice their concerns. So that leads me to next steps, because I want to be very, very respectful of your time, and I do appreciate the incredible feedback today. We have recorded this meeting. I'm going to download it, save it on the Transparency website. I will email out within the next couple of days a copy of the link, a copy of next steps from what we got from this meeting, and then I will be working on a survey that I want to send to you all for your feedback before we distribute it. But we'll start fleshing out some ideas on how we involve other stakeholder groups in evaluating the website and what we're providing.
Tiffany, quick question.
Yes.
So I know this is a system initiative. Are there going to be links to the individual campuses? Because I think sometimes there will be campus-specific feedback.
Yes.
That people need to submit. So how will we host it on our website as well, and then link to the bigger site?
So I think that's a great idea. I will talk to the communicators about how they can post a link to the website on their page. And a lot of the campus information, we're basically, just in an effort to make sure information stays accurate, we are not recreating information. We are linking directly to campus and institute websites where the information lives in most cases. So we'll continue to try to keep that format going so that we make sure we have the most accurate information on our site. I do not, I want to keep you all updated via email as much as possible over the next few weeks, but I'm thinking, do you all feel that late March, which would give us 2 months, would be a good time for us to reconvene this group and sort of talk about progress made and next steps from there, and we can communicate via email until then? Does that sound like a good option? Okay, great. Well, I will send out another doodle calendar to the group, and we will get that on the calendars in the next week or so that way we can make sure we have time set aside in a timely manner. But thank all of you for your feedback and for participating today. And if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
When we talk about student demographics,